On last night's show, attorney Ron Sullivan sat down with Jim Braude to talk about his successful defense of Aaron Hernandez against a double murder charge and his belief that Hernandez was not responsible for the death of Odin Lloyd, a statement a jury disagreed with in 2015 when they found the former New England Patriot guilty of that murder. Tonight, it's a very different conversation. Hernandez was found early this morning hanging from a bedsheet tied to a window in his cell at the maximum security prison in Shirley. He was pronounced dead shortly after. Prison officials say it appears to have been a suicide and that his cell door was blocked from the inside. But attorney Jose Baez, who represented Hernandez alongside Sullivan in his latest trial, is requesting an investigation, saying in a statement, Aaron was looking forward to an opportunity for a second chance to prove his innocence. Those who love and care about him are heartbroken and determined to find the truth surrounding his untimely death. Hernandez's murder conviction is currently under appeal before the state's highest court. So what may have led to his death, and how might it change his case? Joining me are Northeastern University law professor and WGBH legal analyst Daniel Medwed and national NFL reporter for the Boston Globe, Ben Volen. Thank you both for being here. Thanks. Ben, I want to start with you. You wrote a piece for the Globe today in which you expressed sadness, not just for Hernandez's victims and the members of his family, but also for him personally. Why do you feel sadness for Aaron Hernandez?
I feel sadness for Hernandez not as much as I did for the victims, of course. The victims and his 4-year-old daughter, those are the victims that are most important. However, Aaron Hernandez is a tragic figure here in American society. This is a guy who had his entire life in front of him, the world at his fingertips. He signed a $40 million contract at the age of 22. Could have been an NFL star. He should be out there winning Super Bowls with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Him and Rob Gronkowski could have revolutionized the tight end position. And instead, he got caught up with the wrong people and a wrong mentality. And certainly, he is responsible for his own choices. But I just find it tragic that someone who had everything in front of him was just so willing to give it all away and fell under some bad influences and was willing to just kick it all away for nothing. For, as we found out in these trials, machismo and a gang lifestyle.
I was going to say sort of cheap machismo. What was the response to that part of your piece? I went to read the comments, and I don't think comments were enabled on this feature. What did you hear from people?
They were for a while, and it was not pretty. Certainly Twitter, I heard a lot of it today from fans who are disgusted by just the mention of Aaron Hernandez, and you should feel no pity and no sympathy for him. All the sympathy should go towards the victims, and I completely understand that sentiment. I find sadness in Aaron Hernandez because it's such a waste of a life. It's such a waste of a great opportunity. He could have provided for his young girl. Now his baby daughter will grow up without a father and will eventually learn about the horrific things that he did. And I understand that you shouldn't feel any sympathy for him, but I don't believe that Hernandez was born a murderer and a bad person. I feel like some circumstances led him there.
Daniel Medwed, what are the legal implications of his apparent suicide? What happens now?
Well, specifically with respect to the pending appeal that you mentioned, Adam, there's a concept in the Commonwealth known as abatement by death. If a defendant dies while the appeal is pending with respect to his criminal conviction, the case is dismissed. You go to your grave as an innocent man, so to speak. The rationale really is that the state no longer has an interest in punishing you, keeping you behind bars. You're no longer a public safety risk, and you're no longer blameworthy in a metaphorical sense because you're dead. You no longer have to face retribution.
How unusual is that aspect of law here in the Commonwealth? Do other states do this?
Most states do it, and it dates back centuries to the common law of England. The vast majority of states do this, and there have been a couple high-profile cases in which it had cropped up in Massachusetts. I think it was Father Gagan a few years ago. It also came up, but it's very rare just because it's quite rare for someone to die while the appeal is pending.
Okay, so his conviction in the murder of Odin Lloyd will be vacated.
Most likely.
Most likely.
There is an opportunity in the case law. Sorry to interrupt on that.
No, please.
There's an opportunity in the case law that the prosecution and or the family members could protest that general practice and say, we have a substantial interest in continuing with this appeal. But the presumption, the default, is dismissal.
Okay, and what about the possibility of civil suits brought by the families of Daniel De Abreu and Safiro Furtado.
Yeah, that's interesting. We were talking a little bit about that beforehand, and it's quite possible that they could bring the lawsuit. I believe that the abatement rules are slightly different in the civil context, but there's an interesting issue about what money, if any, might be available.
One of the things I think that made this surprising to a lot of people is that, as we mentioned just a moment ago, this came on the heels of him winning an acquittal in the alleged murder of those two men. We have a little sound of Ron Sullivan and video of Ron Sullivan, one of Aaron Hernandez's attorneys, talking about how he sensed better things for Hernandez in the future, specifically involving the Odin Lloyd case. Let's take a look.
I got to know him over the course of the year and got to know him as an individual and became quite fond of Aaron. The Odin Lloyd conviction, we'll see about that. It's not final, as you know. I think that Aaron Hernandez associated himself with some people whom he should not have. But I do not think that he pulled the trigger on Odin Lloyd, and I don't think he's responsible for that death.
Now, I think that sense that maybe he was going to be able to contest the Odin Lloyd conviction may be why Hernandez's agent today tweeted that there was no way that Hernandez killed himself. He just said it's not something he would have done. As far as you two know, from what you know about the details of this case, is there any reason right now to question the suicide finding?
Well, I think you should always question it. You should always do an investigation just to make sure there was no foul play. Even if he is a convicted murderer, we need to make sure that this was a suicide and not he wasn't murdered in prison. But, you know, what's interesting in hearing his agent today and hearing his attorney say there were no signs of depression or suicide and this is out of character for him, this is exactly what people were saying about Aaron when he was arrested in 2013. They knew he wasn't a choir boy, but they had no idea that he was capable of murder, and he never showed any outward signs of being capable of these heinous acts. So he's a guy who didn't really show his emotions too much.
And didn't TMZ, I only know this because I was Googling furiously before today's show, didn't TMZ get a hold of a jailhouse letter he wrote a couple years back in which he discussed in some graphic detail ways to take your own life? I think it was in a discussion with someone who he was not pleased with, but his mind at least tended to move in those directions sometimes. What do you think? Any reason to question the suicide finding?
I think, as Ben said, we should always question it. We should always investigate it. But we do know this about Aaron Hernandez. He has a track record of erratic and impulsive behavior. So even if he was elated on Friday, that doesn't mean last night he was in a good state. Also, my recollection is that at one point he was on suicide watch at Susan Baranowski.
I think you're right, yeah.
And he was taken off suicide watch maybe a year or two ago. So it's quite plausible that it was, in fact, a suicide. And I think the facts surrounding the incident where he allegedly used some of his personal items to prop up against the door to make it harder for the guards to come in, if, in fact, that's true, it would suggest a forethought on his part.
I want to ask you about something Bob Kraft said back when this whole episode began. Kraft said that if the allegations against Hernandez turned out to be true, that he had duped the Patriots organization. Did they make any change in their MO when it comes to evaluating and drafting players as a result of what happened with Aaron Hernandez?
Nothing too drastic. There was an incident not too long after Hernandez was arrested where they were talking about bringing in a bottom of the roster guy, a 90th guy on the roster, and he did have a gun either issue or conviction on his record from back in college, and he wasn't a violent person, and he hadn't gotten in trouble since, but Robert Kraft stepped in at the last minute and said, no, we're not bringing this guy in. Now, if that person had been a star player, we'll see.
Yeah.
You know, it's different rules for different types of players, obviously. The Patriots have always kind of taken a stance against domestic violence ever since Robert Kraft bought the team in 1994. There was a high-profile case with Christian Peter, who they drafted and subsequently released. But still, the Patriots, they do kind of take some chances on guys with character issues, and they believe that with a strong program headlined by Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, that they can kind of keep these guys under control, and that Aaron Hernandez, I think we can all agree, is a pretty isolated incident. Most of these guys with issues aren't necessarily going to be murderers.
Last question for you, Ben, really briefly. Has there ever been any sort of statement of contrition on the part of the Patriots organization for bringing him into Massachusetts?
I don't know for that specific thing, but when they reconvened after the summer when Hernandez was arrested, Bill Belichick gave a lengthy press conference, spoke for almost 30 minutes and talked all about it and really explained what happened and what they knew and what they didn't know. And again, they knew that he wasn't a perfect choir boy off the field, but they didn't expect him to be capable of this.
All right, Ben Volen, Daniel Medwed, thank you both.
Thank you, Adam.